trends in testing. Before I introduce the participants of this panel to you, let's talk a little bit about the theme of today. When you take a closer look into conferences and the agendas of the different conferences, you can see a number of topics. Some are more technical, some are more human related, and some of them are evergreens like testing strategies, and other ones are, for example, how to better communicate. And I think you've all seen different kind of workshops and talks on these topics before. But of course, when you see into the programs of conferences, you also find those topics which are new and sometimes very, very specific. So only for a very small part of the audience. And sometimes there are those topics which are also quite specific, but they are new and they are really interesting, or you seem that they are really relevant because they push the field into a new direction, and therefore they are quite exciting. Today, we're going to talk about those topics. So we are talking about trends in testing. I think most conferences should have a session like that where we talk about those trends and what we think those trends are. So I'm really, really happy for the participants of this talk today. We have Andre, we have Simon, and we have Tony. And they will give you a quick introduction about themselves, and we're going to start with that. So, Tony, what do you like to tell us about yourself and why you got into testing and why you still like it?
Seriously, I've just run a 4-hour workshop. Give me a chance to get my breath. Jeez. Hello, everyone. My name's Tony Bruce. I'm based in England. I like to get around to conferences around the world. As I just mentioned, I've run a 4-hour workshop, and it's the most I've talked in about 7 months. So I'm actually starting to lose my voice from that one session. I'm there out of practice. Let me see. I love software testing because, to me, you have to be curious. Whatever you do, you have to be curious. And curiosity definitely helps in software testing. That makes you interested. And there's enough going on in the world of software testing and software development that you're only bored if you choose to be bored. There's just so much stuff that you can look into, investigate, read, play with, people that you can meet, all kinds of different people with all different experiences and background, and they all add to the awesomeness that is software development and software testing. I've already forgotten the questions that you asked. Did I answer these?
Thank you very much. Simon.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Yes. So, my name is Simon. I am based in Switzerland, and I am working for a company called House of Test. So I started out in testing. Was kind some years ago I started in IT in general as system engineer first, and then one lucky day, I had to create a test strategy for that project where I was in at that time back. So and that was kind of the start into the testing world, and I'm still with it today. Most of the time I'm dealing with testing stuff. And this because it's such a huge field, there's such a huge amount of possibilities you have, and I still want to learn out there. It's just an incredible space which seems to me never ending, and that's why I'm still here. Yeah.
Thank you, Andre.
So, hello to everybody. I'm Andre. I'm actually the outsider here. I'm not a professional tester. Let's say I'm a hobbyist when it comes to testing. I'm actually a front-end developer, so I do front-end ever since I can remember, ever since I think I got paid for my the first lines of code I wrote. I'm currently working as a consultant. I'm based in Bucharest. I'm also a trainer, and I also organize like a lot of I do a lot of community work. And the fact that I'm not let's say really anchored in this world of testing, as I said, I do testing as a hobby rather than something I do professionally, proves the diversity that this conference had, which I'm really which I'm really glad for. I actually come from the land, and I'm what I will bring to this discussion is exactly this angle from the developer part, and especially from front end, which didn't have a good relation with testing throughout the years, but actually started with not testing. Like testing to me came really late in my career, and it took a while to understand why you need to test and how to do it correctly, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be a really interesting discussion, and I'm going to reminiscence a bit about my experiences with testing.
Don't worry, you're not an outsider. I'm also not working as a tester.
Okay, good.
I'm working as a CEO at Quality Minds, also a consultant company, but we are mainly doing testing and learning things. So you're not the only one in that panel not working as a tester. But I started working as a tester a couple of years ago. I actually started as a requirements engineer, but my first project was a testing project. And therefore I learned a lot about testing, and I find it great, especially as it relates a lot to research. And I did a lot of research beforehand. And this is how I came to testing. And the reason why I kept on in that community is because I like working with testers. They are awesome, and they are very, very curious, and they like to learn a lot. And a lot of people know that my real passion is in learning. This is what I do as a consultant. This is why I really like to work with that community. And this is why I'm here as a chairperson for the Romanian Testing Conference. And so let's start going into detail. Andre, when we started our pre-conversation, you said that this is a very good topic to talk about because this topic is extremely enjoyable. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so as I said in my introduction, I come from let's say kind of a tradition that front-end development and JavaScript development in general had of not writing tests. I mean, when I started writing tests, we had our code moved either on a USB stick on a physical server or through an FTP server or something like that. So we just lined some lines of code, and then we refreshed the application in the browser to see if it works. And so there was no such thing as testing like 10 years ago in front end, and still it took some years to actually go into a team that cared about testing and did testing and had a really nice testing strategy. And so for me, that was one of the moments where I actually started to understand the importance of testing. And I think a lot of JavaScript and front-end developers have this moment where they don't test, and then suddenly they go into a project where testing is done, and luckily testing is done the right way, and all of a sudden, like, they understand, and all of a sudden testing becomes this really big thing. And in what you said, in the tradition of learning new things, for me, that's why it's enjoyable, because I still consider myself to be learning a lot about testing and testing technologies, and especially in front end, and we'll talk about this when it comes to trends. There's like a lot of new tools coming up, a lot of new ways to do testing. So for me, it's enjoyable because it's one of those things that transition from something that you normally don't do to something that you have to be a fool not to do, because it's actually quite fun with the tools that you have at your disposal right now.
Yeah. Before we start talking about the real trends and what you think is a trend, perhaps we should do some definition work. What defines a trend for you? Because in order to see this as a trend, we need to know what a trend might be. And how do you identify a trend? So just giving us a little bit background. Simon.
How I would define a trend? I would define a trend as tons or a lot of people are doing something new in testing. And a lot of people are actually very ambitious and very happy to do that. And it's kind of a need, a need in the project that it's a customer need, or whatever need it is. But I would define a trend, with these words, that something that people are keen doing, and then it's kind of it's required, or whatever what they're doing in their project,
Okay.
And to identify, by just listening to Andre, for example, I can listen to Andre, and he talks about new tools and coming out there. I can spot things. Okay, then I would ask, which tools do you, what tools do you see coming? What's the latest trend in the front end, and so on? By just listening, then I could actually identify new trends, and then of course talking about it. You had that topic yesterday about the communities, which I think is a very important topic, to go out and collaborate with communities, join communities, talk with people, go take workshops, go to conferences, and so on, to actually get this, to get involved in communities, and then you suddenly identify tons of trends, and what do you do with the trends at the end? That's just up to you, of course. Take what you need in your current project. I for myself, and my current project, I would like to do everything which is out there, but that's not needed at the moment, or no no one would actually pay me for doing everything which is out there. But so I try to grab all these trends for my current customer project. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Tony, do you like to add something?
So similar to what Simon just said, I think that the trend, so Simon mentioned the word new. I don't think the trend is necessarily something new. It is just something that people are willing to follow, and more people will follow. And it's not even necessarily something that's good or beneficial. It's just something that's out there that people are willing to follow for whatever reason. That's what a trend is to me.
Okay. How would you identify a new one? That there are a lot of people on Twitter talking about it, or?
So I'm going to go against the grain a little bit. I think the trends, or the trends that you follow, are going to be the trends that you're looking for. So if you are, say, Andre's the front end UI type person, that's where his main focus is going to be, and that's the trends that he's going to see. I'm different. I guess classify myself as a specialist generalist. I kind of try and maintain a wide breadth of things.
Okay.
So I'm always on the lookout. Whereas other people say, if you're interested in automation, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see the newest libraries, the new tools. If you are, I don't know, someone that's focused on exploratory testing, the new things that are out there in that direction are what you're going to see. So the trends that are out there aren't really that important to me. For me, it's about looking inside and seeing what I'm actually interested in, and then looking for that. I am going to see what's out there because, as I mentioned, I do try and keep a general view of what's happening. And obviously, I attend conferences, so I can see there what kind of new XYZ tool that I've never heard of suddenly has 5 different workshops at this conference. I can see, well, maybe that's a trend. I'll look into that a little bit. So yeah, there are things on Twitter, there are things at conferences, but for me, trends are where I'm looking, or I'm looking at the trends that I want to see.
Okay, that brings us to my next question. What is the trend you are currently most excited about in testing? So we are still talking about trends in testing. The current one.
The current one for me is that I think, or I'm seeing, and I don't know if there is actually one, or if it's what I'm seeing, but there seems to be a resurgence of focusing on, I want to say, air quote, actual testing rather than just automation. There are a lot more roles, or I see a lot more roles looking for people that can talk about testing, that will mention and bring up exploratory testing and how they do those sorts of things. And it's not just purely focused on automation.
Okay.
On the other hand, there are plenty of stuff that's just focused on automation, which is fine. But I am seeing more and more things that are talking about actually getting into the nitty-gritty testing educated experienced people.
Andre, what do you see in trends in testing?
So again, talking about trends in testing in front end, and one of the trends that I saw in the past one or 2 years, let's say, is the emergence of more and more complex for doing integration and end-to-end testing. Like we already had good tools to do unit testing on the front end. It's a whole discussion about how do we unit test on the front end. But when it comes to end-to-end testing, which makes a lot more sense, I see first of all a departure from classical tools like Selenium and so on and so forth, which have, they're super awesome tool and people have done a really great job, but they have a reputation of being somewhat hard to test, and have web applications being more and more complex and having like a lot of things like asynchronous stuff going around. It made it a bit difficult for tools that are based on Selenium to keep up. But there are a lot of tools that are coming to the I want to say not necessarily to the market, but are coming to the table. And one of my favorites is actually Cypress.io, which was, as we were talking about trends, was promoted by a lot of trendsetters, let's say in the front end world, and actually made end-to-end testing hip again, right? Which is a really important thing. So writing text suddenly became cool. Like this is something I'm actually seeing in the front end community happening for like 1 or 2 years, with the emergence of these new tools that make it super easy to write these end-to-end tests that are fully written in JavaScript, that run directly in the browser, so you don't need an extra drivers and servers and what have you. And it makes it super easy to write tests, because this is one of the problems with writing tests for JavaScript and front-end application, was that it wasn't always straightforward and tools weren't always as easy to use as they should have been. A lot of progress have been made. And I think that this is the trend that I'm seeing right now. A lot of great, awesome tools that make testing easy and make testing cool. So like it's a cool thing to test your application now.
Simon, what's your point of view?
So for me personally, a big trend is learning new things all day long, and never just rest. I think this is the biggest trend for me. I'm super fascinated what Andre said. I would really love to swallow all these stuff, but I just can't because it's too much, which is actually out there to learn. But just keep pushing myself forward, and never rely on what I have learned yesterday. Just looking forward. And also a big thing goes into direction what Tony mentioned. Don't forget the other part, the exploring things, which we are actually very good at, which needs the exploration or the people skills and so on, which is also a tremendous area where we can learn daily, day in, day out. So I think it's never be restless if you like the job, and I'm super happy about the job I have, because every day is something new I can learn. I think that is the biggest trend which I see at the moment, and I think it's not just going away, that trend. It's kind of never ending. Yeah.
I'm not sure that learning is a trend. I think the learning community might disagree with you on that one. But when we talked about test automation, manual testing, which is methodology. When we talk about content, so what is the current trend in testing? When we talk about the content, what are we testing? And for example, one project we are currently testing at Quality Minds is testing AI. So how should tests be written, especially if you are if the thing you're testing is learning itself? Then we are coming back to learning, because this is what learning scientists are doing all along. We are testing someone or an environment which is learning himself, herself, or itself, and this is kind of interesting. Another trend I've indicated in the last couple of years is testing in production. It might be not the hottest trend at the moment, because there are people talking about that for basically 1 or 2 years by now. But this is more content related in my point of view. So when you see content or something you like to test, or what you think is a new trend in testing, what would you think about? And I'm giving back to Tony.
So Big Marker is telling me my mic is not working. Is my mic working?
Not really.
It's not working? Or is it working?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So I think that part of the things, some of the things that you mentioned, they're there. There's a lot of content, but for me, there's how do I phrase it? There's a lot of setup that's needed or work to get to that point. You know, to be able to use AI in your testing, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. All of that kind of stuff. Just it really depends. There's just so much content. I think that and I've forgotten where I heard this kind of phrase, but I think you have agreement that these things are good or bad. You might say this is useful to us, but you also need the commitment to actually go through and set these things up and have these things in place. And in many cases, I think there's a lot of agreement, and there's a lot of agreement about good content, a lot of good options, not so heavy on the commitment to actually do these things and put time to them and people to them and resources to them. I don't think that answers your question. I think it's gone off on a tangent, but I think that there's a lot of content, but you know, there's this thing about agreement and commitment, and there's a lot of agreement that there's good content on there, not necessarily commitment to actually use it or put it to good use or learn it.
Okay.
Which I think is an issue.
Simon.
Yeah. Testing I think that this is what you actually said, Vera. I think there is this is a new trend, or this is the trend with this whole AI stuff. You know, it's just to find out how we can support us all these tools by analyzing test data, for example, and how that can affect our tests. Of course, I think that's the next, or that's the phase we are currently in. How can all these tools, which have this image recognition and so on, which analyze the test data or the data which we give them, because always we have to feed them that they can do something. How can we feed them to so that they can actually help us, you know, and be more efficient, you know, that we don't have to manage that hands-on, or kind of, so that they can support us as best as possible. Yeah, I think this is definitely a trend. Yeah.
And perhaps even better, perhaps overcome our own biases. I heard Sharon talk about biases yesterday. Tony was talking about biases today in his workshop. I think one thing what I would love to see as a trend in testing is to talk more about biases. And I know Patrick Prill is talking about that topic from time to time, because when we talk about feeding data to, for example, in AI, talking about biases and talking about the human factor again, I think this would be a lovely trend to talk about that more. Andre, what's your opinion about the content and the trends in there?
So it might not be 100% related to what you're talking about, but what came to mind hearing you talk a bit is, I mean, when you're talking with AI and testing, and what comes to mind is actually the help that AI can give us in. I mean, of course, testing AI is important, but also how can AI help us in letting us figure out, what tests to write and how the quality of our tests and so on and so forth. So I already see, like, if we're talking about trends, one of the trends I see, I notice, especially when writing code and looking into the big front-end frameworks like Angular, React, and when you create code. If you create it through their own, scaffolding CLIs or whatever, they actually create a test file for you that has like a small test written to encourage you to continue writing the test. And I know there are projects in the direction that, based on the code that you've written, actually recommend what tests to write and to give you a better understanding, especially in this area of accessibility and so on and so forth. Actually, giving you some pointers into what direction you can go with your test in order to better cover this topics. So that's one thing that I'm seeing as a trend, as something that I wish I saw more.
Thank you. So that brings us to our last question already. What do you think the next trend in testing might be, because basically this is what we're all going for in such a session. So what could the next trend be in technical testing, so test automation, but also for manual testing when we're talking about methodology or even content? So it's your topic of choosing. So we start with the non-tester in the room, Andre.
So when I started to think about the topics that we were talking here about, what the future trends are, it was really difficult for me to imagine what's next. Already I feel like the future is now. Like I already feel, as I said, with all these tools that are coming on a day-by-day basis, faster, allowing us to run more tests and better and more have a better accuracy. I already feel like I'm living in the future right now. But I'm guessing one of the things that has to do with, or as something that I see as a trend, especially in the community and on Twitter and so on, is more attention given to the theory behind testing and why we should test and what should we test, what makes sense to test, and so on and so forth. Because in front end, we're used to seeing a trend and jumping on that trend train and going along with it without thinking too much. So I think one of the things that needs to happen is that we now have a lot of tools to do exceptional testing on front end. And I think what the next step should be is actually understand how to better use these tools. So I think this is one of the things that will be the focus for front end developers in the future, where we actually to start learning some testing theory, not go after 100% coverage and that's it. Like I have 100% coverage and I'm done. So that's one of the things that I actually don't necessarily see it, but I hope, and it's one of the trends I'm actually going on. Like this is one of my personal goals in the future, is actually to better understand testing theory and make my life easier when it comes to testing.
That's a nice one. Tony.
It's kind of similar to what Andre just mentioned, actually. I think that there is going to be more of a trend at looking at the thinking behind testing, but also, as you mentioned, what all these libraries and frameworks are giving us. Because when people talk about these things, they talk about how fast they get through their 15,000 tests or whatever it is, not what these tests are actually doing or giving or what they're learning from these tests.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be more of a direction or heading in that direction. People are going to realize that 15,000 tests in 32 seconds is not necessarily helpful. It's just quick. It doesn't actually give them the kind of feedback or learning that they need. And I think that's slowly starting to happen, and I think that's going to pick up and become a trend. And in fact, I think the four of us should push that trend and make that happen.
Simon.
Yes, we will do that. We will do that, Tony. Yeah. Yeah, from a technical perspective, it's kind of obvious what Andre said, that the development itself and testing are more and more melting together, and we can help each other out and we can learn from each other. I'm super happy also to help out to some point in the future ones with whatever it needs, front-end development or whatever, this is really exciting. So I think from a technical perspective, with all the tooling which we have today, that development and testing are really melting together, and that's makes me really happy, that I can see that what Andre said, that people are realizing what testing is, and that we also as tester can realize what development means. So this is really cool. And from the kind of manual part, what you mentioned, or from the exploring part, I think it's not a new trend, but we still need people, skilled minded people which understand all these different disciplines with business analysts, requirements engineering, the customers. I mean, there's tons of stuff to do, we can't neglect that. So this will continue, of course. That's not a new trend. This is just going on, that we have someone in a project, or even better, if we have people in a project, which can fill all the gaps, which can bridge these communication gaps in all these different disciplines which we have there. Yeah.
I think these are lovely finishing words. And basically, it's 1 minute after 7, so our half an hour is already up. Thank you so much for talking about trends in testing, for sharing your thoughts and your ideas. And I hope to see you all again. And tomorrow we are talking about gender in testing. So I would love to see you all there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.